Welcome back to NRA News, Cam and Company. Still to come on the program this hour, Heather Marchese from 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control. Right now, I want to welcome to the program from Psyid, John Cardillo with us once again. John, how you doing, sir?
Great, Cam. How are you?
Appreciate you joining us. And, I got to say, I really appreciate you writing about your story because, look, I think every gun owner and every Second Amendment supporter has a compelling story to tell. And yours, I think, is very compelling. You started out, and we've talked about this before on the program, you started out on the force in New York, weren't really a gun guy, and it wasn't really until you had to deal with the violent criminals in your precinct that you realized, God, these guys are coming after me. The mom at the bus stop, I mean, she's threatened. She needs to be able to protect herself, too. So you've got a follow-up piece at NRA American Warrior and NRA Life of Duty, talking more about your evolution on the right to keep and bear arms, right?
Yeah. And what I wanted to do, after the first piece ran, and doing no small part to talking to you about it, I started to get tons of emails, and I was shocked at the support by former police, former military, and groups like 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control, who I do work with, and Heather has done an amazing job, and she and her team. And so I got all this encouragement. I said, let me go out and just talk to more of these people, do a follow-up piece. NRA was gracious enough to actually ask me to go in with them, and so I did. And I couldn't fit. I didn't have enough space to fit all the quotes I got. So I took some of the more compelling ones, the two brothers who happen to also be good friends of mine, who are PhD college professors, a criminologist, a public health specialist, who happen to also be reserve police officers, and are two of the most vehemently pro-Second Amendment guys I ever met. But these are the people that the mainstream media won't tell you about, or the retired female police officer who had to live alone with her daughter, powerless for 8 days through Hurricane Sandy, and why she was thankful to have a gun. And so these are the stories I wanted to get out to people, that gun owners are, your neighbor. They're your college professor, your physician, your surgeon, your lawyer. They're not what the left portrays them to be. They're just people that want to protect their families and exercise their God-given constitutional rights to do so.
So I want to ask you about something, John. I don't know if you saw on Twitter today the writer Amanda Marcotti. She had tweeted something about, she had tweeted a link to a news story showing people in and around St. Louis and Ferguson are buying firearms for self-protection. And she said this made her ashamed. It was shameful that in the wake of the death of Michael Brown that gun manufacturers would be profiting from this. And I got to say, I was so stunned. I haven't even responded to her on Twitter yet, but, I'm thankful that we live in a country in which people who want to be able to protect themselves, who know that the police cannot arrive instantaneously, and who are genuinely concerned about, the threats to law and order. I'm grateful that we live in a country in which our rights are respected and in which we can own firearms for self-defense.
Oh, absolutely. I did see the piece, and quite frankly, I was ashamed at someone who would write that. Because I think what she was also trying to do was imply racism on the part of those buying firearms to protect themselves. But I think it dovetailed very nicely and defeated her argument. It was the win of the Milwaukee County Sheriff, who happens to be an African-American Democrat, who's pro-gun, that the left tried to defeat. And I think, when you look at her argument and then you compare it to a constitutionally elected chief law enforcement officer who happens to represent the anti-gun party, happens to be, an African-American law enforcement professional, that pretty much nullifies people like her, doesn't it? I mean, we're trying to bait, race bait, and I agree with you. I think what's happening in Ferguson, it's crime, and people are just trying to protect themselves against crime. It has nothing to do with, at this point, the rioters to me have nothing to do with Mike Brown. They're just opportunists.
Well, yeah, and I don't know how much Sheriff Clark serves as a refutation, but I did see a news story earlier today in which one of the owners of a local gun store was interviewed, and he said, "Look, we're seeing everybody coming in. We're seeing older people coming in. We're seeing younger people coming in." He said, "I had an elderly black gentleman who came in who bought a handgun and bought a shotgun because he said these people aren't going to they're not going to burn my house down. They're not going to take away everything I own. This is, so to that end, yeah, I do think you're right. I think Amanda Marcotti was trying to say, oh, look here at these fearful white people in Missouri who are, afraid of what's going on. And that's not what's happening. What's happening is that people who are living near the scenes of these spontaneous outbreaks of violence, or perhaps even less than spontaneous outbreaks of violence, are concerned that they'll be caught up in it. And they are taking steps to be able to prepare to protect themselves. That same news story, John, mentioned a strip mall where two of the stores actually had their employees and their owners out front with guns protecting their storefronts, and another store, same strip mall, didn't have anybody there, and that place had the front window broken, had a bunch of clothes stolen from inside the store, and look, it's logical to take away. If you're there, able to protect yourself and your property, then chances are people aren't going to. The mob isn't going to target you for destruction. They're going to move on to an easier target.
Well, sure. No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, that's all this is about. I mean, and, again, the anti-gun crowd selectively edits their imagery, right? I mean, we know this. We're shooters. When you go to a gun range, they're not predominantly white men. There are women. There are black shooters. There are Hispanic shooters. There are Asian shooters. It's a very inclusive sport and hobby. And so that myth, I'd love to dispel further. And I'm going to do a follow-up piece about, minority and female shooters and Second Amendment advocates. But back on topic, you're 100% right. These are just people who want to protect themselves against crime. And there is precedent, sound precedent, when we look back at the L.A. riots. Those store owners that were armed, the pretty famous imagery, were pretty much the stores that were left alone. The rest of those stores in those neighborhoods burned to the ground, and people lost everything. But the ones who stood their ground with their rifles in front of their stores, didn't lose everything. Their families weren't left penniless. And so I can't really, in fact, I think these business owners in Missouri are exercising very sound judgment in protecting their investment and doing so by using their constitutional rights. I mean, to me, it's so logical, it's silly we even have to debate it.
Yeah, it is. I want to go back to your article for a second, John, because you mentioned a few minutes ago a retired New York City police officer and a mom who you talked to, Elizabeth McGrory Manning. And as you said, it was Hurricane Sandy. She said, living without power for 8 days after Hurricane Sandy in a secluded area left me scared and worried. Someone siphoned the gas out of my car in my driveway. It was the first time that I truly realized how important the Second Amendment is. And I thought it was interesting. She said it's not about the gun. It's about your right to protect yourself and your property.
Yeah, and understand. I mean, the area that she lives in is one of the better areas outside of New York City. It's secluded. It's a bit more rural, but it would be considered an upper middle class to, I would even venture to say affluent area in some places. So this wasn't a bad neighborhood, and I think that's what really, had it all crystallized for her. She's like, wow, I live in this great neighborhood. I know my neighbors. We moved up here to be out of the city, and there are people siphoning gas out of my car. I mean, what's next? Are they going to break into my house at gunpoint? And so I think she, illustrated very nicely, and I really was impressed with her quote, why she is a mom. I mean, she really took herself, when I spoke to her on the phone about that, she really took herself out of the role of retired police officer and really was just a scared single mom in her house who was very thankful she had a firearm there during that time.
John, let me ask you this. With all of the efforts going on, the cultural efforts going on to otherize women like Elizabeth McGrory Manning or Heather Marchese or Dana Lash or Katie Pavlich, to otherize parents like myself who have taught my kids to be safe and responsible around firearms, to otherize retired law enforcement officers like yourself. And say, oh, look, you're just a gun-toting thug, John. Is this paying any dividends for the gun control movement, in your opinion, or is it backfiring?
I think it's backfiring. I mean, I think you and I first spoke back when I did a piece on the social media traction the anti-gun crowd was getting as opposed to the pro-gun crowd, and how the pro-gun crowd was far outpacing them, pro-Second Amendment crowd, I should say. I think this is only backfiring on groups like Moms Demand Action. It seems like every other day on Twitter, their spokesperson, founder Shannon Watts, is putting her foot in her mouth. She's misstating or, concocting a fact or a photo is being debunked. But I see it just I speak to a lot of people. After I write these articles, I get emails and they call my office. And people that would be very atypical, people like you mentioned earlier, in this segment, the neighbors. I have neighbors that live across the street from me. They're a couple in their 80s. And I've been sitting with them a couple of times a week discussing what they should buy. And they've narrowed down the handgun they want because they just feel vulnerable. They worked in banking their whole lives. They retired very comfortably. We live in a very nice area in the Coconut Grove section of Miami. But they just said, hey, look, we're in our 80s. We're not going to fight off somebody who breaks in. It could happen. We want a gun. And several of the elderly couples in my neighborhood feel the same way. And they've called me up. They've knocked on my door. They know my background. And I love helping them out. It's a lot of fun. But I'm starting to see a sea change in people. They're starting to realize, hey, this is available to me. Why not have it in the house? It doesn't hurt anybody. I'm going to lock it in my closet. But, God forbid I need it. I'm going to feel a lot better that it's there. So I do think it's backfiring on them. But I think it's not so much that it's backfiring on the anti-gun crowd. I think the pro-Second Amendment crowd, people like yourself, are doing wonders. You guys are getting the word out there very effectively, and you're making people think. People are saying, you know what? This is very logical. Why wouldn't I have a firearm? I have a fire extinguisher. I have a garage door opener. I've got lights in my house with a sensor. It's kind of crazy that I wouldn't have that last line of defense.
Listen, I really appreciate that, and I hope that we're having an impact in that regard. And what I want to highlight one other thing. When you talk about like your neighbors, are they're interested in buying a gun? But John, are they also interested in getting training in knowing how to use this firearm?
They actually are, because they're very sharp. I didn't, I was kind of surprised when they told me that they were both in their early 80s, pushing mid 80s. Because they're in pretty good shape. And but they were adamant about it. They said, look, we really want to learn how to use it. Will you take us to the range? And the husband was kind of into it anyway. He just wanted to pick it up as a hobby, in his later years. But the wife was actually very serious about training. And she's a very politically engaged person. But she was real adamant about it. I want to learn how to use this. And God forbid something happens to me and my husband, I want to know what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I've seen a trend toward responsibility. I mean, people don't just want to go out and buy it. They want to know what to do, but not just how to use the firearm, Cam. They want to be trained on what to do if someone breaks in and through every step of that potential incident. So I'm seeing a lot of sound judgment being exercised by people.
Yeah, I am too, and I want to make sure that I'm not just reading too much into this, but it really does seem to me that, as you say, the people who are thinking about this, maybe for the first time, or they're making the decision to buy a gun after having thought about it for a while, this is, they are defying the stereotype that the gun control advocates want to create of people who simply buy guns and then are irresponsible, where they don't know how to use them. That's absurd. If you've decided, look, I want to own a firearm for self-defense. I want to be able to protect myself if, God forbid, somebody breaks into my home, or if you decide that you want to get your concealed carry license. It strikes me as kind of absurd, John, that you would say, okay, I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to take this step. I don't really think it's important that I know how to use it. I don't really think it's important that I actually feel comfortable with this firearm. Simply having it in my house, that will be enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, out of all the people I've spoken to about this issue over the last even 6 months, I can't recall one person, not a single one, who hasn't expressed an equal interest in having themselves trained as they do in purchasing the right firearm for themselves. And so I don't think, obviously without a study, put that in quotes, it's always going to be anecdotal. But in my gut, I feel it's anecdotal. I think that people really are as interested in being trained and being trained well as they are with owning the actual piece of hardware.
Yeah. Well, listen, John, again, I really appreciate you coming on the program. If folks want to find your latest piece, how can they do it?
It is on the NRA American Warrior. I believe it's just NRAAmericanWarrior.com, and it was page 138 of the online magazine that was up there on the NRA's page. And they can also follow me on Twitter at John Cardillo, and I have links up on my Twitter as well.
All right, we've got a link up at Cam and Company on Twitter as well. John, thanks again for coming on the program, sir. It's always good talking with you. I hope we can do it again soon.
Anytime, Cam. Always fun on my side as well. Thanks.
All right, thank you, sir. John Cardillo joins us from Psyid here on NRA News, Cam and Company. Welcome back to NRA News, Cam and Company. Deal of the day, hero of the day. Coming up top of the hour. Also next hour, Dave Kopel, right into the Volokh conspiracy about last night's election victory for Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark. And David Webb, host of the David Webb Show, join us next hour as well. Right now, I want to welcome to the program Heather Marchese from 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control. I love it when synergy like this happens, Heather. We were just talking with John Cardillo from Psyid, who quoted you in his piece at American Warrior Magazine, and now we have you on the program. So thanks for coming on.
Great. Things come together, huh?
Yeah, I love it.
Awesome.
I love it. You know, this is what this is all about. It's just about bringing good people together, right?
Right. John's been great. Let me tell you, he's been wonderful with our group. He's done a lot for us, and he's helped us a lot. So, great guy. And anybody that listens to him, take heed to what he says because he knows his stuff.
Yeah, he does. Now, listen, in West Virginia, it sounds like more and more people are knowing their stuff when it comes to concealed carry.
Right.
The Logan Banner in Logan, West Virginia, points out the number of concealed carry permits issued annually in the state has more than quadrupled over the past 5 years. Heather, 2009, county sheriff's departments issued 11,160 concealed carry permits. In 2013, that was up to 44,981. How about that?
That's, you know what, it's great. I think it's a wonderful thing. I've actually talked to some people. Now, I've just moved here back in October, so I'm not 100% familiar with all the politics of West Virginia. I come from Maryland, so that's a lot to absorb in of itself. But I've talked with quite a few people, one being Art Tom with West Virginia Citizens Defense League, and the one thing that I'm finding the most common with everybody I talk to regarding the concealed carry permits is it's basically it's awareness. It's awareness, not that crime's going up. It's, you know what I mean, or violent crime. It's social media has a way to bring an incident where, you know, something that happened right down the road that you wouldn't really know about, but it's everywhere. You know, it's on social media and you know about it. So it makes you think, you know what? This isn't going to happen in my home. I'm not going to be that next person. So it's not, I mean, West Virginia, you would think it's rural country, it's quiet, it's back roads, and it is. I love it here. It's beautiful. But every state has that criminal element. Every state. I don't care where you live. You've got it somewhere. So West Virginia does have some of it. And people here are they're aware of the fact that, you know, the police are there to respond. They are not there to protect you. They cannot. They cannot be there before the criminal. The only person that can respond to your life and to protect your life, that's yourself. That's it.
Yeah. And, you know, as you say, people are paying attention to this. You know, we were talking about the numbers here a minute ago. The Logan paper points out that a permit in West Virginia is good for 5 years. So if they're issuing 44,000 permits a year, they say that at least 126,000 West Virginia concealed carry permits were issued in this 5-year period. I think that's fantastic. And again, as you say, it doesn't suggest that people are, you know, they're not afraid to live in West Virginia. It's not that they, you know, are afraid to leave their home. But they do realize that West Virginia is as beautiful as it is. Yeah, it's not crime free. And, you know, I actually drove through the state of West Virginia last week, and it's a beautiful place. I love spending time in West Virginia. But, you know, there are a lot of places, Heather, where the police are not going to be even minutes away. You're going to be waiting an awfully long time to get a police response.
You really are. I mean, it's not, you've got some bigger cities. You know, you have Charlestown and then Martinsburg, and then you have roads and miles of nothing but neighbors every 2-3 miles in between. I mean, it is your backroads country state. So if you expect, the nearest police officer to arrive in seconds, think again. That's just not possible. There's no way for them to get from the city to the county. I mean, within seconds, there's no way. And to expect them to do that, that's asking a lot. I mean, take the responsibility and arm yourself. Protect yourself.
Yeah. Now, the paper in Logan, West Virginia, talked to Corporal Brian Humphreys, spokesman for the Kanawha County Sheriff's Department, and he said, Heather, and you're going to be shocked by this, that the county has not experienced a dramatic increase in shootings over the same 5-year period in which they've seen a dramatic increase in the number of concealed carry holders.
I'm sorry, where was I going to be shocked about that? That's not shocking. I thought you were going to give me something where I was just going to be like, oh, no, that's, of course not. I mean, concealed carry holders, okay, there's, I can't think, off the top of my head, I can't think of the police that just quoted this. It wasn't John. But, he was asked, he's like, and I think it might have been that county, honestly, Cam, he was just asked, all these concealed carry permits that people are getting all of a sudden in the recent surge, doesn't that concern you? And no, it doesn't concern him. It actually relieves him. And he's happy with the fact that these people are actually going out, getting their permit, to conceal carry. That means they're taking that extra training, that extra step that they need to take to protect themselves. They're not just people running around and, taking it back to the Old West and gunslinging and bullets flying everywhere. When you are a gun owner, when you have a concealed carry permit, you have the utmost respect for the law and for safety and for life. And that's what we're about. I mean, I'm going to protect my family just as quick as I would protect anybody else's family. I'm not going to let something happen to anybody, and that gun is just my equalizer to be able to do so.
Yeah, and I think as I'm looking here, the story, I think it was a lieutenant with the West Virginia State Police, Lieutenant Michael Bayless. He said, what you have to remember is these are law-abiding citizens going through the proper process. The criminals don't go through the proper process to get a permit. He said, do we encounter more people in traffic stops who have weapons? That might be fair to say. He said, but 9 times out of 10, they do the right thing and inform us that they're carrying. He said, it's clear to me, just from the position that I'm in, the moral fabric of our country seems to be wearing thin, and you see more heinous acts being committed each day. Carrying a concealed weapon is a personal choice, and I see why more people might be making that choice, which, I realize as a lieutenant in the state police, he has to be careful about giving his personal opinion. But boy, that sure sounded like and I don't have a problem with this. I'm kind of glad to see people protecting themselves. Stance to me.
It sure does. It sure does. I mean, take it with a grain of salt, I guess, if you want to, but it's pretty easy to read between those lines. It really is.
Yeah. So, Heather, I got to ask you while we're talking about this, what is the latest with your group, 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control? You talked about how John Cardillo has been giving you folks a lot of press. What's the latest with your group?
We're doing great things. We've done a lot of restructuring. We're actually focusing more on our mission and less on Facebook pages. I know we had a big Facebook presence. We still have that presence, but now we're going to actually start going out, mobilizing, getting people on the ground, opening up to more options with training, working with some other groups, bringing more training, women-friendly training. We want to try to offer as many reduced discounts, as many chances for free training as possible. Eventually down the road, I'd like to look into, discounts for handguns through our group, things like that, anything to protect yourself, self-defense classes, anything that we can do to empower women to be able to protect themselves and their families. And that is literally what we're about, to empower women to protect themselves and their families at all costs. And John's been phenomenal. I mean, as you know, we're grassroots. So, I mean, I've got my kids are upstairs playing video games. My fiance's in bed. He's getting ready to go to work tonight. So we really are just grassroots. And John has been absolutely phenomenal at helping me pick up and put everything in the right place to actually mobilize and get people active. It's things that we're doing now are just amazing, and I couldn't be prouder of the people that we have.
That is fantastic. All right, Heather, if people want more information about 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control, what's the best way to find you?
They can go on our website. It's 1mmag.org. We can go on Facebook is facebook.com/1 Million Moms Against Gun Control. and we're on Twitter at 1MMAGC, the numeral 1. And you, mister, I'm still waiting for a date for you to come up here and hang out at the range sometime with us.
I know, and it's going to happen. It will. As I said, I drove through West Virginia yesterday or last week, and I was planning on being able to like take a few more days off, but it didn't happen. I got hit by chiggers, Heather, and I spent the rest of the week itching and scratching. Yeah, it was awful.
I'm so sorry.
I know, but it's okay. But at some point, very, very soon, I will get up there, or I'm just throwing this out there. You know, if you and Holly want a road trip down to Farmville, Virginia, we would love to host you here for a day.
That would be
fantastic. You can sit in on the show with us, you know. So
that would be great.
One way or the other. All right.
Definitely. Well, you know how to
we'll
get
figure it
too,
out.
So awesome. Thanks, Cam. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, Heather. Thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Heather Marchese joined us from 1 Million Moms Against Gun Control here on NRA News, Cam and Company.